now I'd like to bring to the the free speech area, Dr. Tom Weise. He's the keynote speaker for today's event. Please help me in introducing him. Thank you.
It's too late to change your grades. Sorry. Justin told me to prepare for a 20, 30, maybe a 40-minute presentation. And then I get here and they say you have 8 minutes, good luck. So these are gone. But I just want to do a quick discussion of the culture, what it was like, what we grew up with, or what my generation grew up with, what got me into in the time in the military and as a veteran afterwards, and what's going on with today's vets. First, oddly enough, born in the 50s, so my dad, my grandpa, and most everybody's dad and grandpa had been in either World War II or Korea. We had a very big respect for our veterans. And at that time, there was some rumblings about something going on in Southeast Asia, but there wasn't much discussion about it. Our enemy was the Soviet Union. And so we were in grounds trying to take over countries that they weren't taking over, and vice versa. We did come to a head with the Cuban Missile Crisis because that's what we were worried about. We had what's called mutually assured destruction. And as in grade school, as a student, we would practice duck and cover. We would see the flash, and then you would hide under your desk. Then, when you got the all clear, you would go out and clean up. That was what the government was telling us we could do. The duck and cover in California still goes on, but it's for earthquakes. But we had an enemy, one enemy. During that decade, more and more was going on with our country, specifically in Vietnam. The number of troops started increasing, and then when Lyndon Johnson took over, it really escalated till we had a lot of boots on the ground in South Vietnam. Supper brought Vietnam into our living room. Every day we would get the totals with number of wounded, killed, MIA, POWs for both our side and the North Vietnamese and the Viet Cong. One of the key things was that there was always more North Vietnamese killed and wounded than there were the U.S. It became part of the national discussion. And oddly enough, some people thoroughly disagreed with our involvement in Southeast Asia. The movements started out on college campuses and then took off from there. There was also the major civil rights movement going on, where we had a situation where people were protesting for equality, both for male and female equality, racial equality, all of that was going on, and it came to a head violently in a number of scenarios. What students don't understand is at one time, most of the United States was on fire, and we moved to Wisconsin in the early 60s, and to go visit our relatives in Chicago, we'd have to go through a National Guard checkpoint in Milwaukee in order to get down there. And so the upheaval that was going on as a kid, completely different than what it is today. As part of that culture, oddly enough, I grew my hair out when I had hair, and I definitely took part in the activities to try to bring our troops home. One thing that people couldn't understand at that time, though, was it wasn't the troops' fault. The United States won every battle they were in Vietnam. We lost the war. And we lost the war because we couldn't win the hearts and minds of the people back here. And the veterans were treated like garbage. They were spit on, laughed at, had garbage thrown at them. It wasn't a good time to be a vet for just doing your job. Most had no choice. They were drafted. And in '73, our combat operations started to slow down and stop, and we were moving combat troops out of Vietnam. In '75, Saigon fell. And to this day, it's reminding me of what's going on in Iraq right now. Once our combat troops are out, they're back up into an upheaval. Now for me, I started my senior year, I was 16, I was gonna turn 17 in November, and the officials at my high school mixed up my birth date with my older sister. So they asked me if I was gonna stay in school as an 18-year-old. And I said, sure, sure. And so I accidentally missed about 108 days of my senior year. So my dad sat down with me in late April of '76 and said, "What are you going to do? Have you thought about the military?" The GI Bill was still in effect for that year, so I said, "Why not?" And because my dad was in the Air Force, I went in the Army. So I had basic in Fort Sill, Oklahoma, and Fort Sill, the barracks I was at, was used for the new all-volunteer Army. There was 3 men to a room, there was carpeted, there was a bathroom in every room. It was a completely different Army. The PT was the same, but the living conditions were much better. And then I had asked my recruiter about being a psych tech, and he said, if you graduate in the top 5% of medic training, you get to go on to an advanced school. So I headed down to Fort Sam for my AIT, and I graduated 7th out of 420 some people. And I looked at the person who was cutting my orders and said, "I want to be a psych tech." And they laughed and said, "Did your recruiter tell you that?" And I became a medic. And so I was sent to Frankfurt, West Germany, where at 21st replacement, having a W for a last name finally worked to my advantage. Everybody up until the W's went to a line unit. W's and above went to the 97th General Hospital. At the hospital, we had people who were still drafted. Most of the doctors that were still there had been from the draft. And so the MASH mentality would be a good one to try to describe what was going on. If you salute me, I'll have to break your arm. I'll set it, but I will break it. That was the attitude. I was able to let my hair grow a little bit longer, and the discipline was relatively lax. West Germany at the time had a couple of groups running around that didn't particularly care for them. Baader-Meinhof gang was the number one. We learned to deal with terrorism on a daily basis as they would blow things up, kidnap people, and do whatever it is terrorists do on their days off. For example, what we learned is we wouldn't be right here right now because of that garbage can. That garbage can would be gone because that was one of the main places to put bombs. If you saw a presence sitting on the sidewalk, you crossed the street. Everything would be booby-trapped. So this is our mindset. Nothing like this was going on in the United States at the time, but they were living with it. To this day, if you go to London, there are no garbage cans in the streets thanks to the IRA. Okay? Their streets are very clean, but the garbage cans are gone. Now, I spent 2 years, 7 months, and 11 days, or thereabouts, in Frankfurt working at the 97th. Spent 11 months male medical isolation disease and 2 years ambulance ER. And I ETS'd on June 23rd, '79. I got back to my hometown, West Bend, Wisconsin, immediately got a job in ER. So here I am, a veteran working at what I've been working at. Unfortunately, the first person I worked with threw up. I went, "Where's your mops?" They said, "You don't do that, that's housekeeping." The next person came in, needed blood drawn. I went, "Where are your vacutainers?" "You don't do that, that's lab." The next person needed an IV. I said, "Where's your setup?" "You don't do that, you need a license." So I asked them, "What do I do?" Next to nothing, it turned out. I lasted 3 months and then I flew back to West Germany. Besides what went on in ER, the people I had left 3 years before were at the same bar stool I had left them at. So I went back to the West German culture. 8 months later, I came back to the world. That's what we called the US. And got a job working the Chicago Northwestern Railroad as a track laborer. In the winter, I would be laid off from there and I would mud labor, humping concrete for people building basements and patios, that type of thing in the winter. And I finally got laid off for Thanksgiving, and a buddy of mine and I came out here. We were trying to get a job on the railroad again. I went to Fresno, because that's where the Santa Fe was headquartered, and he went to LA, where the UP was headquartered. And I ran out of money in Fresno. A month later, I was homeless and trying to get a full-time job. I spent a month and a half without housing. Back then, the unemployment office, you would go and they would give you a day job and you'd get paid cash. And so whenever you wanted to work, there was always jobs. So I'd hitchhike, because you could still do that, down to the office, get a day job, and it's with those people. Some let me sleep on their couch, some gave me their garage or backyard to sleep in. And the reason why gas station bathrooms are locked is because then I'd go there to clean up in the morning. And so, sorry about that. But I went to the veterans office, and because I was not, quote unquote, a Vietnam vet, I couldn't get a job there. I went to the VA for assistance, and they said, get in line. And things were not working out well for me as a veteran. I finally got a job at Community Hospital in Fresno and worked on the Code Blue team. And a year later, after doing CPR too long, too often by myself, I couldn't feel my hands anymore. And it finally clicked with me. The GI Bill, remember why you went in the Army in the first place. So I started at Fresno City. Fresno City, I got my AA in 86, went to Fresno State, got my BA in 88, MA in 90, and I was fortunate to get a job here full-time in 91. But when Gulf War I started, one of my students asked me, what do we do? And I went, what do you mean? I said, we're at war. What do we do? Just what you're doing now. It hit me. There hadn't been that type of involvement for so many years, people didn't know what to do. Now, leading up to today, we have a situation where my daughter has never known peace. It's completely opposite. And the men and the women who are serving, it's still all volunteer, are working to keep what's going on over there. And so that we can have the ability to meet, we have the ability to get together and talk. And regardless of what we think about our government, we have the right to be able to voice our opinions thanks to these people and those that have served before them. What do we need now? I've taken 6 of my students to the health center. They desperately needed psychological help. We need to increase our mental health facilities here for our veterans. Thanks to our technology, the major injuries coming out of Iraq and Afghanistan were traumatic brain injury and amputations. We need to do more for these individuals so they can get help they need physically so they can get on with their life. And especially here at college, we need to expand our programs. Before I met the people who are standing behind the table over here, the Veterans Office was a one-person job. They've been able to expand it. Now they have the room. They need more computers. They need more space in order to help the veterans out. And the veterans have done their job. Now it's time to say thank you for their education. Now that was a 40-minute presentation done in 8. And for those of you who are my students, I did a number of things wrong. So there'll be a quiz on it, maybe today, maybe tomorrow. But I was looking around for a good quote to finish this up. Now that you know about the culture, how I got involved, and what's going on today. And it's from Nick Lampson, an American politician. He said, I believe we should do more than sing the praises of the bravery and patriotism that our veterans have embodied in the past. We should take this opportunity to reevaluate how we are treating our veterans in the present. We need to say thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Tom Weise, for the remarks.